Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Kopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Kopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Ramadhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Padurikacharya Ashtotar that Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padurikacharya Ashtotar that Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. You remember what verse? Is it 6? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 6th day of January 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana Yoga. Text number 6 on page 262. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvad. Bandhu, friend, Atma, the mind, Atmanaha, of the living entity, Tasya, of him, Yena, by whom, Atma, the mind, Eva, certainly, Atmana, by the living entity, Jitaha, conquered. An Atmanaha, of one who has failed to control the mind, 2, but Shatutve, because of enmity, Varteta, remains Atma, Eva, the very mind, Shatruvat, as an enemy. Translation. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind, in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as the Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmadatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Bhakta Glenn. This seems louder than normal. Can we maybe try opening that just a crack and turning that off? It's kind of distracting there. Yeah, I think you'll be all right. Okay. Relief. Thank you. So in the previous verse, we learned that one must deliver himself with the help of his mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So we sometimes forget this, but actually real yoga is always focusing on the mind, because the mind is the real binding agent to this world. When we do something with the senses for sense gratification, a impression is left in the mind, and that impression carries us to do it again if it's pleasurable, or to avoid it if it's fearful. One way or another, we remember, and it's impressed in the mind. And all those impressions together, along with our karma, the results of our activities, is what brings us into the next body, the next body, the next body. So the mind is key. And Krishna says in the present verse that we need to conquer the mind, and then it becomes our best friend. But if we fail to do so, the mind will remain the greatest enemy. So Prabhupada says here that we have to make the mind our friend in order to discharge the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, then yoga is a waste of time. It's really just, it can help a little bit with the physical body, but you're not really getting the benefit. And one who cannot control the mind lives with the greatest enemy. You these days, everyone is aware of, because of our ever wars that are going on for 20, 30 years, devotees, military men, they go and they go for several tours of duty sometimes. And after that, they may, due to the stress and what they have to do over there, what they're made to do, what they see, they come back and they have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which means that there's something in their mind that was a traumatic instance that they can't forget, and it haunts them They can't sleep, they have panic attacks, and they're paranoid, whatever. It's a horrible thing. So, material life in general is like that. Not so extreme, but we are conditioned chiefly by so many impressions that we experience in our life, material life. Even on a material level, the educators know what you experience in your first 2 years of life is going to last for the rest of your life. If you go through some emotional trauma, if you're not hugged enough by your mother, if you're abandoned, whatever, what happens there? There's a thing that happens in the mind, even in the brain, that will forever in this lifetime, cripple you. So the mind is a key element, and in Krishna consciousness, we try to make the mind our friend by directing it toward things in relation to Krishna. Now the mind and the senses work together. It's sometimes said that the mind is the sixth sense. So in the 15th chapter we'll hear about the different senses, both the active and knowledge acquiring senses, grouped about the mind. Because the mind is directing the senses. Oh, eyes, go here, look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. I don't want to see that, that's ugly. We're going here and there. And the same thing with the other senses to some degree. Perk up, especially for sound. If there's a pleasant sound, or someone a familiar sound that can draw your attention. Mind is constantly deciding, go here, don't go there. Shut that off, like that. So, the science of bhakti is meant to discipline our activities in such a way, the activities of the senses and the mind, so that mind is always thinking of Krishna. That's the idea. It's most obvious in the chanting of the mantra. We know that one of the 10 offenses is not to be attentive. That means the mind is wandering. So as we learn in this chapter, from wherever and whatever the mind wanders, bring it back under the control of the self with a capital S. We want it to be controlled by Krishna. And indeed, Krishna is so all attractive. This is the great advantage of the bhakti yogis. First of all, Krishna is helping us, because you're trying to revive this loving relationship that gives him pleasure. The fact that we're exiled, that we forgot him, that we're not engaging in that loving relationship, that's a minus for him. Of course he's infinite, and he has infinite devotees that he relates to. But still, he wants our particular love also. So when he sees that we're making a little effort to come back to him by following the program, chanting his name, it's very, very intuitive. If we're walking by a door and people are chattering inside and suddenly hear our name, oh, what are they saying about me? You go back and say, oh, what are they, is this something nice? So to hear your name chanted is attracts you. So Krishna's attracted when we chant his name purely and we're fully attentive. So the holy name certainly helps us to control the mind and to experience the pleasure that comes from just thinking of Krishna, just being Krishna conscious. So when the mind is controlled, in that it's been trained through the practice of devotional service to always think of Krishna. I mentioned that last night about avismriti. Non-forgetfulness means always thinking of. Then the mind becomes your friend, because it naturally goes to Krishna. In other words, it's reconditioned so that your mind takes pleasure in thinking of Krishna. You don't have to drag it away from the material pleasures which you're still attracted to. And one negates the other. This is real sannyas. This is talking about sannyas in the previous chapter, right? And in this, I think, in this beginning of this chapter, what real sannyas is. So, really, sannyas, or renunciation, means to to be detached from everything material, and to be attached to Krishna. That's the ultimate in sannyas, vairagya. So for one who has conquered the mind, in other words, trained the mind to always think of Krishna, the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, the mind will remain the greatest enemy. And why is that? Because that mind of yours has got all these impressions, and the conditioning. And if you're sadhana bhakta, meaning your practice, if your practice becomes weak or deviate, then the material element of your mind will drag you away, distract you, and you'll feel difficulty in Krishna consciousness. So he talks about enemy and friends. So the fact of the matter is that in our conditioned state, we're living with our worst enemy. We don't even know it. You're not even aware of the mind. It's just that this is just you. And I have certain preferences, this and that, I like to do this, I like to smoke that, like that. It's a free country. It's not a free country. It's a binding country. The mind is the key thing. And when we're chanting, there are various ways of thinking about the holy name that help us to concentrate, and to hear. But we have a certain amount of free will. We can direct our attention, and we can, oh boy, I didn't even hear that whole round. I hardly even heard, sometimes. So let me just, Hare Krishna. Or you can read. That's why we put the sign up there. We had a devotee here, Madhavapuri, I think his name was. For years he was here. He was one of the book distributors and everything. He would sit over there, and he would look at that sign and chant Hare Krishna. It helps. So even in we don't do it very much, but there's something called Likita Japa. Have you ever heard? Likita means to write. Just to write the holy name. Page after page after page. You imagine how absorbing that is. And trying to keep it neat, So whatever helps to focus the mind on Krishna. So that the mind becomes one's friend. And is you wake up in the morning and naturally you chant Hare Krishna, and even you may have if you do it a lot. Like the other day, my alarm didn't go off. I opened my eyes and I was like 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes past where I usually wake up. I said, "Well, okay, that," because you get conditioned. So that's what this is all about. When the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead. So the idea is that it becomes calmer. There's not so many distractions, and the voice of the super soul is much louder, and you're following naturally. That's what Prabhupada is saying. When the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as a Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. So, and you carry that with you, just like has been made very clear here and in our morning class, because we're also talking about the Paramatma, right, externally as the Brahman, that the super soul comes externally as the spiritual master or spiritual masters, and as the Shastra. So if one, we have a certain amount of freedom. We can read this, or we can space out. We can, hear, or we can, turn our attention elsewhere. So if you're making the effort to really absorb this, you're actually getting instruction from the super soul, from Prabhupada's book. So we have all facility. We should take advantage. So then the purport is reiterated in the next verse, text 7. Chitatmana pashantasya Paramatma samahitaha Shitoshna sukadukeshu Tatamana pamanayo. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Purport. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or Supersoul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme. So it's an interesting concept here that the mind must submit to some superior dictation. So what does that actually mean? So I'm thinking, I come back to my verse again, which you probably heard before. Kama dinang katina katita palita donidesha. This is Madhavendra Puri wrote this verse, and it's included in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya is teaching to Sanatana Goswami about the process of devotional service. So it's a prayer, and he's saying, my dear Lord, in how many ways, in different circumstances, in lifetimes, have I obeyed the dictations of kama adina? Adina means etc. Lust, follow anger, greed, illusion, all of these things. So, being completely ignorant of the higher self, the super soul, or anything like that, these emotions, these forces come over me, and they take hold of they force me to act in a certain way. If you're overwhelmed with anger, it's practically a force you cannot control if you don't have any assets in yoga, and you do things that you would probably never do before. Sometimes you commit some crime that you pay for the rest of your life. So he's saying that for births after births, I've been controlled, just like a slave driver. I told you, you ever seen those? I don't know if you ever saw the movies where they have some Roman slave ship or something, and it shows inside the guys are, they're chained and they're faster. You can't do anything, So it's like that. We're bound up in the body, and we have our mind, which is full of these, anger, greed, lust, and it forces to act this way, and then we have to act in another way to counteract the reaction from what we did before. It goes on like that. So that's the higher force. When we are not hooked up to the really higher force of the super soul, Krishna, then we're conditioned by the subtle aspects of the mind, which are very, very powerful. Lust, anger, greed, etc. So, understanding that, we should decide what is that best force that we'll be controlled by for our ultimate benefit. And that force is Krishna. It's the internal energy of Krishna. All up until now, we've been controlled by the external energy through the mind, the senses, the intelligence, which are sitting places of the lust. So, in this verse, Madhavendra Puri is saying, I've rejected these now. I don't want to be controlled by them. I'm refusing their demand for service. Kamadinam katinagapalita durnidesha. Durnideshas means bad commands, Hesham jata mayana karuna. I've been doing this for birth after birth, and they've shown me no mercy. They're never satisfied. They never, let me up. They continue to demand that I serve them through the senses, the senses of me. So, but now I'm throwing them away. I'm not going to obey them anymore. But I have to obey. I've got to be controlled. So now, please engage me in your service. You see? I've attained my intelligence, higher intelligence, by reading Bhagavad Gita, hearing transcendental sound. There's another force that I want to be under control, because it's a loving force. The Maya is not out. She's a punisher, and so through her agents of lust, anger, greed, etc., she keeps us bound up until we surrender, put our mind on, pray to approach Krishna and his representative, the internal energy, and then she lets up. So that's the idea. So he's saying, but now please engage me in your service, O Lord. I know I have to serve, so I want your service, because that's wholesome. That's to my benefit. So that's the means by which the bhakti yogi controls the mind, by placing it on Krishna, by the prayer, by all of the activities of the senses and the mind and the intelligence that we have that are in the Shastra prescribed. And if we are determined to advance, then we make the effort to withdraw our attention and our energy from the lower self, and we put it into the internal energy. And here it's mentioned as the super soul. Super soul is Krishna in the form of the super soul in the heart, and also in the books such as Bhagavad Gita. Okay. And then we can become tolerant of the dualities of this world. It doesn't whip us around so much. Text 8. Jnana vijnana chiptatma kutasto vijitendriyaha yukta ityuchyate yogi samalostrashma kanchanaha. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi, or mystic, when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Purport. Book knowledge without realization of the Supreme Truth is useless. This is stated as follows. Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabave Grayam Indriyai Sevan Mukhehi Jivado Swayameva Sporatyadaha. One can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. From the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.234. This Bhagavad Gita is the science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure consciousness. A Krishna conscious person has realized knowledge by the grace of Krishna because he is satisfied with pure devotional service. By realized knowledge, one becomes perfect. By transcendental knowledge, one can remain steady in his convictions, but by mere academic knowledge, one can be easily deluded and confused by apparent contradictions. It is the realized soul who is actually self-controlled, because he is surrendered to Krishna. He is transcendental because he has nothing to do with mundane scholarship. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good as gold to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones. So this verse is often quoted. That we start Krishna consciousness, and we have to recognize we're in a contaminated state. The senses, the mind, the intelligence, it's all been steeped in the modes of nature since time immemorial, and so we're not pure. And because we're not pure, we can't perceive the internal energy of Krishna with these gross senses. And so that's what the first line says. Sri Krishna, Nama, etc. The holy name of Krishna, name, form, qualities, and pastimes. There's a certain order to that. It's said that just by chanting the name, eventually you'll see the form of Krishna, and then the qualities, then the pastimes. Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. So that's the Adi. Adi means etc. We cannot grasp them with our present material senses. But if we begin serving him, beginning with the tongue, by chanting his holy name and taking prasadam, tasting prasadam, then eventually, because of our purification, the Lord will progressively reveal himself. Spurat yada, that name, form, qualities which are not different from Krishna, they will reveal themselves according to our purity. So that's a very important point, because one of the diseases of the conditioned mind is that we're always measuring everything according to what we already know. We're seeing the world through the lens of our particular state of knowledge. So we're meant to see the world through the eyes or through the lens of the Shastra. So Prabhupada is contrasting that with mundane scholarship. The old analogy of licking the outside of the honey jar. It looks. You'll never taste it really with that. You have to actually engage in Krishna consciousness. So and then there's nothing really intrinsically of value in the material world. The only thing of value is when it is used in Krishna service. Then it becomes valuable. So pebbles, stones, or gold externally, it's just material energy. But if they can be used in Krishna service, then they become valuable. All right, he continues with this theme. Surin mitrajudasina madhyasta dvesha bandhushu sarushapi papeshu samabuddhi vishishyate. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind. All right, going on, because Prabhupada didn't give a purport. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasistitaha ekaki yata chittatma nirashir aparigraha. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Purport. Krishna is realized in different degrees as Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna consciousness means, concisely, to be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. But those who are attached to the impersonal Brahman or the localized Supersoul are also partially Krishna conscious, because the impersonal Brahman is the spiritual ray of Krishna, and the Supersoul is the all-pervading partial expansion of Krishna. Thus the impersonalist and the meditator are also indirectly Krishna conscious. A directly Krishna conscious person is the topmost transcendentalist because such a devotee knows what is meant by Brahman and Paramatma. His knowledge of the absolute truth is perfect, whereas the impersonalist and the meditative yogi are imperfectly Krishna conscious. Nevertheless, all of these are instructed herewith to be constantly engaged in their particular pursuits so that they may come to the highest perfection sooner or later. The first business of a transcendentalist is to keep the mind always on Krishna. One should always think of Krishna and not forget him even for a moment. Concentration of the mind on the Supreme is called samadhi, or trance. In order to concentrate the mind, one should always remain in seclusion and avoid disturbance by external objects. He should be very careful to accept favorable and reject unfavorable conditions that affect his realization. And, in perfect determination, he should not hanker after unnecessary material things that entangle him by feelings of possessiveness. All these perfections and precautions are perfectly executed when one is directly in Krishna consciousness, because direct Krishna consciousness means self-abnegation, wherein there is very little chance for material possessiveness. Srila Rupa Goswami characterizes Krishna consciousness in this way. So, this is a contrast between the Yukta Vairagya and the Pulga Vairagya. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjataha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam Vairagya muchyate prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunaha mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam phalgu katyate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.255-56. A Krishna-conscious person well knows that everything belongs to Krishna, and thus he is always free from feelings of personal possession. As such, he has no hankering for anything on his own personal account. He knows how to accept things in favor of Krishna consciousness and how to reject things unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. He is always aloof from material things because he is always transcendental, and he is always alone, having nothing to do with persons not in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi. So, how to be nirashir aparigraha, to have no attraction. This word asha or ashi comes up again and again. We sing every morning. I have my asha, Tulsi. I want to always swim in the love of Radha and Krishna, like that. So that word asha is very important. In the 16th chapter, it comes up in relation to the demons. Asha pasha shatar buddha. That demonic frame of mind is thousands of ropes, the asha pasha, binding one to the material world, unfulfilled desires, never fulfilled. But this is good asha. This is nirasha, means you have no aspiration for material things. And aparigraha, you don't have a sense of personal possessiveness because you know everything belongs to Krishna. So this is he's describing, and Prabhupada always brings it to Krishna consciousness, how this is the ideal way, especially in this age, to attain this state of perfect yoga. And then he gives these wonderful verses about vairagya. If you look at the last section of each of these verses, the word vairagya is there. One is yukta vairagya, that is polgu vairagya. So, anasaktasya vishaya. Vishayan means the object of the senses. Without attachment, Prabhupada says, without attached to anything. Without attachment to the objects of the senses, but employing them as appropriate. Yata arham means appropriately, engaging them in the service of Krishna sambandhe. So you remain nirbandha, you remain unbound to those objects, because you may have the most valuable thing, but your attraction to it is simply as an agent for serving Krishna. You don't regard it as yours, this is Krishna's. My role is simply to bring it into the line of service to Krishna. And that's my perfection. So this is called yukta vairagya. What is that vairagya? It's something that we can all understand. It means lack of attachment. Dispassion is called dispassion. And as I mentioned, this is really much more valuable than straight renunciation, which is called tyaga. Tyaga means literally giving things up. We have those too: no meat eating, no intoxication again. But it's really that what sustains the life of the devotee is the vairagya, because things may come into your hands that are very, very valuable. But if you're a devotee, you'll see, well, how can I use this in Krishna's service? So it's not literally tyaga; it's much more important vairagya. You're not attracted to it as for your own self. So how does that that works by whatever we see, just like this building, this temple building, or any temple building. It's made of the same wood and brick and cement and wires of any building. But because those things in the form of a building have been engaged in Krishna's service, then you're not attached to it as you don't think it as your building. This is Krishna's building. I'm simply his servant. So that's the proper use of the material energy in that way. So that's yukta vairagya. But now, prapanchikataya buddhya, having the mentality of seeing as material. Prapanchikataya means material. Even those things which are directly related to Hari, Krishna, such as the deity, the prasadam, the temple itself, you think it's all material, because obviously it's the same wood, it's the same. You see, it's a stone. It's just a stone. You guys are worshiping an idol. So in being ignorant of how to engage things in Krishna's service, and even those things that are engaged in Krishna's service, you see as material. So that's mumukshabhi. Your goal is mukti. This is the fallacy of the Mayavadis. Their goal is to be liberated, and so whether it's in the form of a deity or just a marble stone, it's all the same. It's not all the same. So they give everything up. Here's the word tyaga. You see, tyaga, parityaga. So they give things up that are even in relation to Krishna. The sound, the transcendental sound of the holy name, it's just an ordinary sound. It's a hellish mentality. So polgu really means weak. Vairagyam polgu katyate. Because without getting the higher taste of connecting to Krishna through the means that we've been given, the senses, the sense objects and things, and purifying them by connecting them to Krishna, then there's a big empty space in our heart. The satisfaction of the Mayavadis, the person is ultimately to be free of birth and death. But that's not fulfillment of the soul. That's a byproduct of bhakti. If you're reconnected to Krishna and you're experiencing that higher ananda, then you're automatically detached. Just like Yamunacharya in this, he spits at the thought. So that's very important. Vairagya polgu katyate. And then you can imagine just moving through this world and being equipoised. The mind is above it. If someone insults you, or you're poverty stricken at one point, you just take it in stride, because you're your real source of pleasure and security is your connection to Krishna. So that's a very valuable thing to be able to be able, to be beyond the dualities of this world, which is what he's talking about here. And the previous verse, with one without a purport, honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, neutral mediators, envious, friends, enemies, pious and sinners, all with an equal mind. So it means that you're not relating to their temporary, situation of you. You see them as spirit souls. You're situated in your Krishna consciousness. Okay, so now he starts giving some practical instructions how to do it, and these are the ones that we ultimately are not going to follow. But they're bona fide, but not for us. Not directly. They're related. There's bhakti relationships for each one of these. But anyway, we'll get into it. Shucha deshe patishtapya stidamasanam atmanaha natruchitang nati nicham chailajana kushottaram tatraikagram manakritva yatachittendriya kriyaha upavishyasane yunjad yogam atma vishuddhaye. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. Purport. Quote, sacred place refers to places of pilgrimage. In India, the yogis, the transcendentalists or the devotees, all leave home and reside in sacred places such as Prayag, Mathura, Vrindavan, Rishikesh, and Hardwar, and in solitude practice yoga where the sacred rivers like the Yamuna and the Ganges flow. But often this is not possible, especially for Westerners. The so-called yoga societies in big cities may be successful in earning material benefit, but they are not at all suitable for the actual practice of yoga. One who is not self-controlled and whose mind is not undisturbed cannot practice meditation. Therefore, in the Brihanaradiya Puran, it is said that in the Kali Yuga, the present Yuga or age, when people in general are short-lived, slow in spiritual realization, and always disturbed by various anxieties, the best means of spiritual realization is chanting the holy name of the Lord. All right, this one you can do. I'll do, you say. Hare Nama, Hare Nama. Hare Nama eva kevalam. Kalau nasjeva, nasjeva. Nasjeva gatadanyata. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. So, now he's giving him practical instructions. You have to go to a secluded place and lay kusha grass and the deerskin. Prabhupada explains the deerskin. There's a very nice, wonderful set of tapes. Are you able to put recordings on that Kindle thing of yours? Or I think so. You should be able to. Anyway, there's something called the Yoga System series of tapes, recordings. They used to be called tapes. Now they're just the MP3s. But he explains why you have the deer skin. Of course, you wouldn't kill a deer, some dead deer. Why the deer skin? Probably if you sit on that skin, then the snakes and things won't come. There's a certain chemical in there that repels them. So the deer are a little safer because of that. They evolved, whatever. So you sit on that skin and the kusha grass, and so forth. Now, this is interesting. The last words here are Atma Vishuddhaye. The whole point is to purify the soul. Purify the soul or the heart of what? Of all the accumulated, impressions and things that you desire, things that you fear, that are located in the heart or in the consciousness. This is the purpose of human life. We find Rishabdev, he talks about this in his first verse of instruction to his sons. Nayam deho deha bhajang haloke kashtang kaman arhate vidbhujange topo divyam putraka yena sattvam shuddhye jasma brahma saukyam tvanantam. Very nice verse. When he says, those who have attained the human form of life, sons, he's got 100 glorious sons headed by Bharat, should not work very hard for sense gratification that's available for the stool-eating hogs. He uses that way. Right. Rather, human life is meant for practicing austerity, and not just any kind of austerity. He uses it for divya, tapo divyam, divine austerity, that aimed at transcendental existence. Because austerity can also be practiced by Hiranyakashipu, become a more powerful demon. So tapo divyam, O son, putraka, by which yena sattvam shuddhye, that your sattvam, your existence, will become purified, and by that purification, yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam, you will attain the eligibility to enjoy unending happiness. So here's the two things, there's the flickering, miserable sensual happiness on the levels of the dogs and hogs, or unending, ever-increasing bliss, that doesn't end, that's always expanding. So only a fool would choose the one, right? So therefore, practice the austerities. So that, but in this, it's not possible. And all of these go to the to the holy places, or especially the Himalayas, and practice this the principles of yoga that Krishna is going to describe here. But it is possible for us to chant the holy name. So if we can do that in the context of the full program of Bhakti Yoga that's been given to us, then we can achieve the same or benefit, or better benefit actually. So that's, Prabhupada always brings that home. Controlling the mind, purification is there, certainly chanting the holy name. Why is it so powerful, a purifier? Because Krishna is supreme pure. And when you chant the holy name properly, without offense, you're being purified by that sound vibration. You don't have to think about it otherwise, just chant. Alright, then we'll do these last two verses. Samam kaya shiro grivam. Text 13. Dariyan achalam stira. Sampreksha nasikagram swam. Dishaschan avalokayan. Prashantatma vigatabhir. Brahmachari vrate stita. Manak sangyamya machitto. Yukta asita matparaha. One should hold one's body, neck and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Purport. The goal of life is to know Krishna, who is situated within the heart of every living being as the Paramatma, the four-handed Vishnu form. The yoga process is practiced in order to discover and see this localized form of Vishnu, and not for any other purpose. The localized Vishnu Murti is the plenary representation of Krishna dwelling within one's heart. One who has no program to realize this Vishnu Murti is uselessly engaged in mock yoga practice, and is certainly wasting his time. Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and the Vishnu Murti situated in one's heart is the object of yoga practice. To realize this Vishnu Murti within the heart, one has to observe complete abstinence from sex life. Therefore, one has to leave home and live alone in a secluded place, remaining seated as mentioned above. One cannot enjoy sex life daily at home or elsewhere and attend a so-called yoga class and thus become a yogi. One has to practice controlling the mind and avoiding all kinds of sense gratification, of which sex life is the chief. In the rules of celibacy written by the great sage Yagyavalkya, it is said, Karmana manasa vacha sarvavastasu sarvada sarvattamaitu tyago brahmacharyam pratakshite. The vow of brahmacharya is meant to help one completely abstain from sex indulgence in work, words, and mind at all times, under all circumstances, and in all places. No one can perform correct yoga practice through sex indulgence. Brahmacharya is taught, therefore, from childhood, when one has no knowledge of sex life. Children at the age of 5 are sent to Gurukul, or the place of the spiritual master, and the master trains the young boys in the strict discipline of becoming brahmacharis. Without such practice, no one can make advancement in any yoga, whether it be dhyana, jnana, or bhakti. One who, however, follows the rules and regulations of married life, having a sexual relationship only with his wife, and that also under regulation, is also called a brahmachari. Such a restrained householder brahmachari may be accepted in the bhakti school, but the jnana and dhyana schools do not even admit householder brahmacharis. They require complete abstinence without compromise. In the bhakti school, a householder brahmachari is allowed controlled sex life because the cult of bhakti yoga is so powerful that one automatically loses sexual attraction, being engaged in the superior service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 2:59, it is said, Vishayamane bhartante nidahara dehinaha vasavajam prasopyasya padam drishtva navartate. Whereas others are forced to restrain themselves from sense gratification, a devotee of the Lord automatically refrains because of superior taste. Other than the devotee, no one has any information of that superior taste. Vigata B. One cannot be fearless unless one is fully in Krishna consciousness. A conditioned soul is fearful due to his perverted memory, his forgetfulness of his eternal relationship with Krishna. The Bhagavatam 11.237 says, Bhayam tu vidya banaveshatakshyat ishadapetasya viparyo asmati. Krishna consciousness is the only basis for fearlessness. Therefore, perfect practice is possible for a person who is Krishna conscious. And since the ultimate goal of yoga practice is to see the Lord within, a Krishna conscious person is already the best of all yogis. The principles of the yoga system mentioned herein are different from those of the popular so-called yoga societies. Perfect practice. I think this is supposed to be perfect yoga practice. I'll look that up. So he's giving very specific instructions now how to sit and what to do with the mind. Meditate on me within the heart, make me the ultimate goal of life. So there's no question that some other object of meditation. Krishna is the ultimate object of any yoga meditation. Let's see. So then there's a lot here about abstinence from sex life, and that's obviously a big distraction. And it's the main bondage in this world is this sex attraction. It's the Adi Ras in the spiritual world, and it's the highest in the spiritual world is Krishna dancing with the gopis, other men's wives, and the lowest in this world is illicit sexual relationships. So, and that energy, when directed toward Krishna, is a very powerful force. Sometimes we hear about that, these great brahmacharis who lifted the semen up, all this stuff. And so it's Prabhupada talks about that on the yoga system tapes. He gives the example of Gandhi, when you think about it, it's pretty amazing that he was able to persevere with this nonviolent program, and through this mass movement, eventually, kick the English out of India. And Prabhupada said he had the determination to do it because he was a brahmachari. He had his wife and everything, but as a young man, 36, he gave up sex relation with his wife. So he said that made him so determined that, through all difficulties, he just saw it through, So that's, determination comes, and it also helps the memory, certainly. So Prabhupada, he talks about a kind of a schooling that is just completely unheard of in the West, to be trained that it's a desirable thing to control that sex attraction. I mean, in my little, short lifetime, comparatively speaking, when I was a kid, and eventually, we had men's and women's dorms in college. It wasn't like a mixed thing, And there was a reason for that, because of the distraction, having the women living next door to you or something, it's crazy. So it's that training is important for a healthy society, really, to have people trained in that. And there's nothing like that going on now. So this verse, as we've learned, we remember from the second chapter, Vishayava Nivartante, that one can restrain or withdraw from the objects of the senses by force, but the taste remains. But if you see, you directly experience the Supreme, Param, Krishna, then you can be fixed. The desire itself, the taste actually leaves, and you can become fixed in renunciation. So that's also mentioned here. All right, we'll pick up on Monday with text 15, and we'll proceed now to have a kirtan. Any of you listening out there, thank you for your attention.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol, Tapas. What's the news?
So, we have 14 people watching now.
Wow.
And we have a questions also.
Oh boy, the problem is I didn't leave enough time. All right, what's the question, real quick?
Okay, it is from Daksha Mataji, Danaburi Mataji. She said, Hare Krishna, nice class. My question is to be free from birth, death. Is it not same thing we should desire?
No, we should. We should desire to be free from birth and death. That's a very important impetus for spiritual life in general and Krishna consciousness in particular. But we should know ultimately that comes with bhakti. In other words, that can be a very important motive for taking up serious bhakti yoga and chanting Hare Krishna. And that's why Krishna says in the 13th chapter, Janma Mitra Jada Vyadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam, part of the elements of knowledge is to be aware of the evils of birth, old age, disease, and death. And that this is something that we want to escape from. But in mature devotional service, that's not even the motive anymore. Because you simply want to serve Krishna, and as a byproduct, that liberation will be there. And even in the present lifetime, you can feel liberated, because if you're fully Krishna conscious, you'll feel the pull and push of the material energy is not there anymore. And we've been talking about that. You're free of the desires. So yes, we do want to be free of birth, old age, disease, and death, and that should induce us to take up Krishna consciousness seriously. We should know as we progress, we'll be so enthralled with Krishna that we will forget about mukti. That'll come automatically. All right, we have to prepare for Arti. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Thank you for the question.